As I started to say, distinguished ministers, representatives, special guests, distinguished Secretary General, distinguished Assistant Secretary General, permanent observers, special guests, international organizations, ladies and gentlemen, it is a signal honor for me to open this 29th meeting of consultation of ministers of foreign affairs convened within the framework of the Charter of the Organization of American States on the basis of the resolution of the Permanent Council drafted to that effect. I have been informed that we now have 34 delegations accredited and represented. There was the need for 23 ministers or delegates for the requisite quorum to be met. The first item on our agenda, on our order of business, is the election of the president, which I now put to you within the framework of this meeting of consultation of ministers of foreign affairs. Let me give the floor to any delegation wishing to intervene. The Minister of Foreign Affairs of Costa Rica has the floor. I thank you, Madam Chair, and a very good afternoon to all. Allow me to put the delegation of Guatemala forward as presidency of this meeting of consultation to be accepted by acclamation. Were there no objection? Your Excellency, the Minister of Foreign Affairs of Guatemala, allow me to express to you, on behalf of all delegations present and indeed on my own behalf, congratulations for this appointment by acclamation of you as chair of this 29th meeting of consultation of ministers of foreign affairs. I wish you every best effort and great success. And without further ado, let me invite you to come take your place at the head table. Thank you very much all, and thank you, Mr. Chairman. A very good afternoon to all of you, distinguished ministers of foreign affairs. Thank you for your vote of confidence in electing me to the position of chair of this very important meeting for our hemisphere. We move now to item 2 of our order of business of this 29th meeting of consultation of ministers of foreign affairs. That is the election of the vice president. I offer the floor for any candidates. Yet again, ladies and gentlemen, we are on item 2 of our order of business of the 29th meeting of consultation of ministers of foreign affairs. I would like to hear from you should anyone have a suggestion as to who the vice president might be. Good afternoon. Bolivia proposes the Minister of Foreign Affairs of the Dominican Republic to the position of Vice President. The technical problem seems to have been resolved. Thank you very much. I was saying thank you to Bolivia for the proposal of the Foreign Minister of the Dominican Republic to the position of Vice President on behalf of us all and on my own behalf. Congratulations to your election of Vice President at this 29th meeting of consultation of Ministers of Foreign Affairs. I'm very sure, Miguel, that with your full support, we shall move forward to everyone's satisfaction. Let us move then on to item 3, ladies and gentlemen. Item 3, formal adoption of agreements by the Permanent Council pursuant to Article 63 of the OAS Charter. In accordance with the order of business, we must now adopt the draft agenda of the consultation meeting that was adopted last 24th of May pursuant to Article 63 of the Charter and published as it was as RC 29 Doc 117. Let me now offer the floor to the delegations which may wish to speak to this draft agenda that we are considering adopting. Nicaragua has the floor. Thank you. Mr. President, the delegation of Nicaragua congratulates you on your election as president of this meeting of consultation. With regard to the draft agenda, Nicaragua, at the meeting of the Permanent Council last Friday, expressed a reservation with regard to this document, and we would request, therefore, that the position be reflected in the minutes of this consultation meeting. Thank you very much, Nicaragua. The Secretariat has taken good note of your statement. Nicaragua, you have the floor. Thank you, sir. It looks as if we continue to be dogged by technical issues. What I was asking is that the reservation of my country be reflected in the minutes of this meeting. It was an express reservation, which we wish to see reflected in the minutes of this consultation meeting. Thank you. Thanks, Nicaragua. It shall be done. Any further comment? In the absence of any further comment, ladies and gentlemen, the draft agenda is hereby adopted by consensus. Let us now consider the adoption of the draft schedule, which, again, last May 24th, the Permanent Council adopted and submits to us for our own consideration. The draft schedule was distributed as RC 29 Doc 117. Any delegation wishing to speak to this draft schedule is welcome to do so at this time. Very good. It appears no delegation has any comment. The draft schedule is hereby approved. We turn to the adoption of the draft rules of procedure. The draft rules of procedure applicable to this meeting, which was agreed by the Permanent Council on May 10th and transmitted for consideration of this meeting of consultation of ministers, again under Article 63 of the OES Charter. We're talking about document RC 29 Doc 317. In the absence of any comments or objections, I propose that we proceed to approve the draft rules of procedure with the provisions governing the work of the meeting of consultation of these ministers of foreign affairs. It is so decided. I turn now to item 4, maximum duration of the statements of the heads of delegations. The President suggests that the statements of heads of delegation not exceed 6 minutes. Should you agree, it is so approved. And so it is. Item 5, deadline for presentation of proposals. In accordance with Article 17 of the Rules of Procedure of the 29th meeting of consultation of ministers of these foreign affairs, it is proposed that proposals that members wish to submit to the meeting of consultation be presented to the Secretariat until 3:45 p.m. of this afternoon. If representatives agree, it is so agreed. We move to item 6, installation of the General Committee. The next item on our order of business is the installation of the General Committee and election of its chair. The relevant article of the Rules of Procedure of this meeting of consultation is Article 19, which stipulates that at the opening session, if necessary, committees will be installed to be governed by these rules of procedures. I suggest that we proceed to that effect, and if there are no objections, we install the General Committee. It is so agreed. We move now to elect the chair of said General Committee. The floor is open, ladies and gentlemen, for any proposals you may have. Let me say again, we are now open to proposals for the composition of the General Committee. I invite the foreign ministers to take the floor with any proposals. The Vice Minister of Chile has the floor. I suggest that the Foreign Minister of Panama be elected. Vice Minister of Panama has been elected, and so too the other member, Vice President, to the General Committee. We move to item 7, installation of the Style Committee. This was agreed at the regular meeting of the Permanent Council on May 24th to be provided for in Article 16 of the Rules of Procedure with a view to cross-checking the text of the decisions of this meeting. The delegation of Ecuador for Spanish, the delegation of St. Vincent and the Grenadines for English, the delegation of Canada for French, and the delegation of Brazil for Portuguese. The Style Committee will be open to the participation of all delegations. Without objections, it is so decided. We move to item 8. The chair suggests that the 29th meeting of consultation of ministers of foreign affairs meet for a given period, which I ask that you define. So please feel free to ask for the floor if you have any suggestions as to the period of time in which we might be meeting. Approximate duration of this consultation meeting. In the absence of any comments, the chair suggests that on the basis of the agreements we might reach, this meeting may be open for such time as we consider necessary. Any objections? Nicaragua. Thank you, Mr. President. I do think it would be useful to hear some views. It seems a bit premature for us to take a decision, such an open-ended decision, in the absence of any comment at all. Well, Nicaragua, I couldn't agree more. But I guess the best we can do is to simply launch into the debate, and then at the appropriate time, I will put the question again to all of the foreign ministers. We should now begin the plenary session, but I would crave your indulgence for a few minutes while this microphone is fixed. So please give us a few minutes.
One, two, 1, 2.
In this regard, and having thanked you all for electing me president of this meeting of consultation, I would like to ask for your support so that we can have a frank and open debate. So the first plenary session of the 29th meeting of consultation of Ministers of Foreign Affairs, convened by Resolution CP Res 1079/17, adopted by the Permanent Council last April 26th, is called to order in order to consider the item on the situation in the Bolivarian Republic of Venezuela. To begin our work, I am pleased to offer the floor to any delegations that would like to refer to the subject at hand. I call upon Nicaragua. Thank you very much, Mr. President. Nicaragua greets all the distinguished foreign ministers here present, ambassadors, permanent and alternate representatives, as well as permanent observers to the organization, members of the international press, the Secretariat, of the OAS. Mr. President, the government of Nicaragua wishes to firmly reject and condemn the convocation of this meeting of foreign ministers with the purpose of intervening in the internal affairs of Venezuela without its consent and approval, in clear contradiction with the provisions of the Charter of the UN and the OAS. The nature of this meeting, illicit and unfriendly against Venezuela, has broken with the institutional order that must prevail in this organization and subverts the international order made up of respect for the sovereignty and independence of states and their right to elect their political system, economic and social systems without interference, and to organize themselves as best they wish. There must be no interference from other states. We emphasize that this organization, the OAS, cannot continue being used by a country or group of countries to subvert the self-determination and the rights of a member country. We demand the end of the political lynching against the Bolivarian Republic of Venezuela. It's a shame that a group of sister countries have discredited the government of Venezuela, joining a broader offensive to generate a progressive coup d'etat in Venezuela. There was already another coup on April 11, 2001, against the legitimate president, Commander Hugo Chavez Frias. This happened on April 13, 2002. This and other actions against other members sets a double standard in treatment of certain countries, and we consider this to be inadmissible and cannot set a precedent in the OAS because it breaks with diplomatic balance and the good neighborliness which must prevail in the hemisphere, as well as legal equality of states. It would be a shame for this meeting of consultation of ministers of foreign affairs that it has been called to jeopardize the sovereignty of Venezuela, and this is really the main purpose of it. We must be clear that the internal issues of Venezuela must be resolved by Venezuela without outside influence. When the essence of this was seen violating the agreements and the underlying documents of the OAS, nothing can be imposed on the free and sovereign nation of Venezuela. It is absolutely essential that these actions cease. We would call the attention of members of this organization, asking them to adjust their behavior to the principles of international law and the Charter of the OAS. None of the provisions of the OAS documents allows the OAS to intervene in the internal affairs of member states. This is a forum for dialogue and is called upon to promote peace and relations of respect among nations, to defend sovereignty of states, and strengthen cooperation among states respecting non-interference, the principle of non-interference. We would invite member states of this organization to show wisdom if they are really interested in helping Venezuela, to start by respecting the sovereignty of that country, the noble Venezuelan people and its government, the people and the government, to protect their democracy and their freedom. As a state member, we must help Venezuela respecting its internal dialogue, a dialogue which is happening in Caracas with Nicolás Maduro, the president, and the Constitutive Assembly. We must preserve peaceful comity, and this dialogue has already been supported by members of the international community invited to participate in that dialogue. We recognize the mediation done by President José Luis Zapatero of Spain and Luis Fernandez of the Dominican Republic and Martín Torrijos and the Holy See. The government of Nicaragua reiterates once again its firm support and its unconditional solidarity with the Republic of Venezuela and the government headed by the constitutional president Nicolás Maduro and its desire to continue its dialogue with the Venezuelan people. I thank you very much. Thank you very much. I thank you for using your 6 minutes, and I would like to ask others to please stick to the 6-minute limit. I now call on Bolivia.
Thank you, Mr. President, and a good afternoon. I greet my brothers and sisters, foreign ministers, heads of delegation, alternate representatives, alternate observers, and news people present. We are here at this shrine of hemispheric relations to uphold multilateralism and mutual trust, but these are precisely the principles that we are, in fact, scuttling. We are here to represent the constituents of these Americas, and we know that two peoples that have built their independence and sovereignty with dignity are being shunned. The OAS is a creation of the strength of our peoples, nations that rose up against colonialism, slavery, and interventionism. We cannot eschew the fact that we stand at a historic crossroads. There are a great number of issues, internal and external, that have bedeviled our countries. If we go north to south, we find all kinds of issues: the stigmatization of immigration, drug trafficking, insecurity, amidst so many other evils. We know that the degree of conflict in the hemisphere has risen in the last years. We also recognize the very difficult situation that our sister republic of Venezuela is living today. Bolivia believes in dialogue as the principal instrument of peace. This is enshrined in our very own Constitution, which is why we believe that the only way forward to resolve the problem before us is the solution of dialogue amongst Venezuelans themselves. The OAS, through its Secretary General, cannot keep goading in favor of interventionism and violence. We, who constitute independent countries, cannot stand idly by while a few attempt to erode principal values of this organization of our hemisphere, which is non-interventionism and self-determination of our countries. We are here to speak for dialogue on an equal footing on the basis of common values. Alas, the aggressions and interventionist attitudes of the Secretary General has led the OAS to become a space of confrontation. He has not played a role as a facilitator and has by now jettisoned the notion that this organization could remain a forum of peace. We are responsible here today to bring ourselves back to the path where we belong. It is some time ago that Mr. Almagro, by his attitude, has in fact cast off the mantle of Secretary General, and indeed the leadership he should have had of this organization. He is favoring hegemonic positions, and it is time we come back to the place we belong. The actions of the Secretary General have in fact generated a spirit of conflict and violence. It has led to confrontation and the death of Venezuelan citizens. We therefore stand against a very dangerous dilemma. Either We opt for dialogue or we opt for confrontation. Either we work for the institutionality of the right of law, or we jettison any idea that that might be the case, and we move in the direction of a destruction of multilateralism and common trust that we have been building all along. My brothers and sisters, in my country, based on the experience of Habla Yala, we have built a community-based and deeply entrenched democracy. We are here in that spirit to dialogue without impositions and without restrictions. The free peoples of this continent don't need tutelage or protectors. Nothing we decide here will be useful without the participation of Venezuela, that's for sure. And we are witnesses to the fact that in innumerable meetings, including meetings at which meetings have been adopted as on April 3rd of this year, no step has been taken toward a solution in that country, far to the contrary. We, the brothers and sister republics of this region, must work to ensure that the solution is found in Venezuela, where Venezuela will be the leading interlocutor, and where we cast aside any spirit of interventionism. International law explicitly recognizes that every country, every state has the right to organize itself as best it considers without foreign intervention. That is our task here, to strengthen integration and political dialogue through diplomacy among our peoples and for the well-being of all. Thank you. Thank you, Minister. Thank you for committing to the 6 minutes you had, and I give the floor now to the delegation of Mexico, the Foreign Minister.
Thank you very much, Mr. President. I greet the heads of delegation and all participants in this meeting of consultation. The grave economic, social, and political situation in Venezuela is one of the major challenges on our continent. The gradual deterioration is seen in hunger, lack of medicine, poverty, violence, unemployment, and an increasing political breakdown. This meeting of consultation, which has brought us together today, is intended to allow us to dialogue objectively, responsibly, and in solidarity on this urgent matter. We celebrate that the presence of so many foreign ministers, because this reflects the importance we attribute to this, and we share this concern here in the OAS. The OAS, in addition to sharing geography, we share basic principles, rights and obligations, respect for sovereignty, self-determination, and the peaceful settlement of disputes, as well as promotion of human rights and democracy. These values presuppose access to power and its exercise in accordance with the rule of law, the celebration of free and open elections based on universal and secret vote, multi-party system, political parties, and the separation of the branches of government. This is what we all share. For that reason, over the last few months, Mexico has followed with great concern, and working diplomatically, individually, and jointly with other countries, we have worked to encourage the Venezuelans to find a peaceful solution, a democratic and institutional solution to the crisis. Within our organization, Mexico has been one of the countries which has sought actively to push for a political settlement on the basis of respect, fraternal friendship, and respect. We are convinced that the building of a negotiated solution to this crisis must come from the Venezuelans themselves, but we also feel that the international community, this hemispheric community in particular, must act so that the parties will reestablish trust and thus develop a new process of negotiation and political agreement, in addition to having new visions and proposals to follow up on the commitments adopted for the reestablishment of the political order. That's why we're here. That's the spirit in which we come. We seek to evaluate objectively and collectively the present situation in Venezuela, to identify mechanisms whereby we can promote rapprochement among all parties by peaceful means through negotiation. The acute polarization we've seen over the last 2 months, together with the increase in violence since the 1st of April, which has led to a number of deaths and many wounded, this makes us all extremely concerned. There are no guarantees for free speech, and there is a large number of arbitrary arrests and a number of Venezuelan citizens being tried in military tribunals. This situation, contrary to the constitutional principles of the Venezuelan state itself, as well as international instruments which are on the same subject, is involved the Inter-American Human Rights Commission. We are also very concerned by the lack of food and medicine, drastically affecting the lives of Venezuelans, especially the poorest Venezuelans. We repeat our will to do what we can to promote a solution to this crisis. We do not agree with the postponement of elections or the restrictions against important political actors who are imprisoned, are not allowed to leave the country. Initiatives such as a constitutive assembly to write a new constitution in the terms proposed by the government is encouraging this climate of distrust. We think it's urgent, then, to have a political agreement allowing Venezuelans to recover democratic normalcy and the exercise of their fundamental rights. Mr. President, we have the obligation to deal with the difficult situation in this country and undertake diplomatic efforts to return Venezuela to democratic normalcy in accordance with the Inter-American Democratic Charter. Mexico, as a defender of the principle of non-intervention, feel that this principle cannot be invoked to justify alterations to the democratic order in the hemisphere, and certainly not to elude responsibilities in the field of human rights or respect for the rule of law. As I already said, our organization is not just a geographical group, it's a community sharing values, principles, and obligations. So we cannot turn our backs on what we have built together over almost 70 years. All nations face problems like this. Mexico is no exception. Mexico has challenges in the field of poverty, inequality, and the grave consequences of violence caused by organized crime and drug trafficking. In the face of these challenges, our country is open to the world to overcome all this on the understanding that we are open to international scrutiny as an instrument of change. We think that neither denying problems nor isolation or excluding ourselves from the OAS will help us, and certainly will not help Venezuela. It should be clear that Mexico will continue committed to the region and to Venezuela with utmost respect for the Venezuelan people. Our country will always be ready to contribute to the peaceful and democratic solution of conflicts in the region. Mr. President, ladies and gentlemen, if this meeting of foreign ministers resolves or does generate agreements or humanitarian assistance, we would certainly be more than willing to participate in these efforts in the framework of friendship and solidarity with the Venezuelan people. I thank you very much. I thank you. You spoke for 6 minutes. I congratulate you. The Foreign Minister of Argentina has the floor.
Good afternoon. This is our organization. Each state sitting around this table has undertaken a foundational commitment to the rooting and representation of representative democracy as an inextricable premise to freedom and development in the region. We also recognize the promotion and protection of human rights and fundamental freedoms, the exercise of power within the ambit of the rule of law, the holding of periodic free and transparent elections, as well as the separation of powers and the independence thereof, inter alia. These fundamental principles, which have been compiled as our legal legacy to the hemisphere, warrants protection, and the understanding that this is an inalienable commitment which we have undertaken. It is therefore our collective responsibility to uphold these principles. We, the states of this hemisphere, have given ourselves the ideal instruments to move forward in defense of those principles, and this organization is the depository thereof. We have the mechanisms that we need in order to ensure that those commitments we've undertaken, we, the member states, are indeed fulfilled in defense of democracy and in the upholding of our values. That is what distinguishes this region. That is what has put us at the vanguard of the promotion and protection of human rights and the defense of democracy worldwide. It is our various systems of protection of human rights that are part of the mandates that we, the states, have conferred to the OAS. With the active support of member states, it is this OAS that has been tasked with ensuring that the mechanisms are in place and are protected. We always remember that democracy is not exhausted at the electoral box. It is an ongoing exercise of power within the framework of the rule of law that undergirds democracy. All of this undergirds each one of our regional and multilateral conventions that we have signed. The defense of these agreements in no way presupposes intervention in the domestic rights of others. These are principles that are universal and universally applicable to each member state of this organization, and that includes Venezuela. Nothing exonerates the Venezuelan Republic from its obligation to abide by its commitments inside its country, within the region, and throughout the hemisphere, to promote representative democracy and uphold human rights. Why are we here? We are here for the same reason that we have met within the Permanent Council. And this meeting cannot be construed by any means as an act of interference or interventionism in the affairs of the Bolivarian Republic of Venezuela. Far from it. We stand, to the contrary, for the principles that have led to the construction of this organization, for the principles that this organization upholds. That is why we are meeting here, and that is why we founded this organization, which has lent a helping hand when it was needed. No member state of this organization has promoted or voted in favor of suspension of the Bolivarian Republic of Venezuela. That is not the case. We are fully cognizant of the value of having Venezuela sitting here with us, and therefore we can only hope that Venezuela will review and revise its decision to leave the organization. We are likewise totally convinced that the solution to Venezuela's problems is in the Venezuelans. It's important that everything that imperils human life there be stopped and that the national dialogue be promoted as it is inching forward, that there be a new era, turning a page that will lead to respect of constitutional powers, protection of dissidents, and elections that will be overseen by independent electoral observation missions. We have seen, alas, a growing number of people lose their lives in the streets of Venezuela and Caracas principally, needlessly. All of this cries out for a solution. We understand that the rule of law and unrestricted promotion and protection of human rights is essential, that the Constitution be respected within the National Assembly, whose powers must be restored and respected as they are freely elected representatives of the people. There has to be a stop to political arrests and to short justice execution by groups that are not justice at all. It is important that the reasons for the ongoing lack of supplies to the markets be looked at and resolved, that the ongoing scarcity of goods in the country, be it food, be it medicine, be resolved. And finally, but certainly not least, we are prepared to take a leading role in any initiative that would lead to the establishment of any mechanism, any mediation forum, any facilitation of any type that will ease the problem in Venezuela and might lead to an immediate and lasting solution to the simply insufferable crisis that the Venezuelan people are enduring. I speak of a solution that will allow Venezuelan citizens to overcome the very deep divisions that are rending the society apart, and that will offer a genuine solution over time. It is on that basis that Venezuela can hope to build the future that Venezuela so needs and deserves. Thank you.
Chairman, colleague foreign ministers, Secretary General Malgo, distinguished representatives, good afternoon. I have the honor to address you on behalf of the foreign ministers of the Caribbean community, CARICOM, in my capacity as a member of the Bureau of CARICOM, Council of Foreign and Community Relations. Mr. Chairman, CARICOM member states have followed with deepening concern, as other states, the Organization of American States, the challenging situation in Venezuela. We have defied the rising violence taking place and deplored the resulting increase in the number of deaths and destruction of property. Venezuela is not only a sister state of the organization, but also a neighbor. Its active solidarity towards the Caribbean community over the years, during good times and bad times, as well as its support for this hemispheric organization, have been deeply appreciated. It is therefore not surprising that we are all deeply affected by the challenges confronting this member state. Mr. Chairman, a sign of the seriousness with which the Caribbean community views what is taking place in that country has been reflected by the recent convening of meetings of the most important councils of our community to discuss the matter. We reaffirm the principles of maintenance, the rule of law, respect for human rights and democracy, as well as to the fundamental principles of non-intervention, non-interference in the internal External Affairs states. We were united in our view that respect for these values and principles prove valuable, pertinent in addressing concerns over the situation in Venezuela. Persuaded that the solution to the present situation in Venezuela had to be sought internally, supported by a process of dialogue, we hold the view that the deeply entrenched positions needed to be softened so that trust could be built on both sides. We therefore call on both sides to step back from the brink, to undertake gestures and actions that herald a willingness to bridge the existing divisions so that dialogue can be facilitated, so that the people of Venezuela could peacefully overcome their challenges. Mr. Chairman, the Caribbean community believes that the hemispheric organization of which we are all members can play an important mediating role when one of our member states finds itself in politically difficult straits. To do so, the organization can offer its good offices to facilitate dialogue and peaceful resolution. To do so, we all need to abide by the principles of the organization's fundamental documents, as well as by the values and principles that underpin the multilateralism, respect for sovereignty and independence, non-intervention, and non-interference in the internal affairs of member states. Our willingness as an organization to assist should never trample on these principles. Such actions can only make a difficult situation intractable. Mr. Chairman, we look forward to productive and successful consultations on this matter of immediate and critical importance. Thank you.
Now, there was a problem. We've had technical problems this afternoon. It was really supposed to be the foreign minister of Panama, and the system erased her name from the list. So Panama has the floor. Thank you very much, Mr. President, Mr. Secretary General, ministers. I am moved by like most others in the hemisphere, by the situation in Venezuela. And I've come to express the concern of my country in the face of the present crisis and the commitment of Panama to contribute to a way out in accordance with the wishes of the Venezuelans. We believe in dialogue, a peaceful solution. We support the mediation of the Vatican precisely to avoid what is now happening in Venezuela. Unfortunately, what is happening disappoints us. We were not able to reach an agreement. We were not able to achieve a peaceful solution to the conflict before now. The figures indicate that since the confrontations began, there are about 58 deaths, thousands of injured, detained, and unjustly placed before military justice. And this questions constitutional order in Venezuela. Humanitarian tragedies, lack of food and medicine. All of this means that the citizens of Venezuela are facing a harsh crisis. The Panamanian government is convinced that the Organization of American States is a forum of political agreement and concerting opinions with the views of all parts to promote the rule of law. For this reason, like other countries have said, we lament the decision of Venezuela to initiate the process of withdrawal from the OAS. Once again, we call upon Venezuela, in respect of the constitutional order, that there be a political agreement reached which will end the present crisis. It's up to Venezuela and the Venezuelans to achieve a negotiated solution. However, in the light of shared values in this organization, we appeal that we continue supporting this effort within a framework of support and respect, as we have done and as we will continue to do. In this light, we deplore the calling of a constitutive assembly in a way that is not inclusive or representative in accordance with the constitutional order. In the adoption of confidence-building measures are absent and must be brought to bear in order to return to a democratic order. In the light of the lack of success in diplomatic efforts, a negotiated settlement is the only way out. We must have peace and avoid more mourning and more tragedy in Venezuela. Venezuela certainly has the support of the entire region in these efforts. So that this negotiated solution be viable, we think that steps must be taken right away to generate confidence and trust, such as the freeing of the detained, respect for the freedom of speech, and the opening of channels for international humanitarian assistance, respect for bodies democratically elected. Panama considers that the OAS must contribute to reach this agreement, guaranteed and verified, so that there will be an immediate return to the democratic order. As a country which suffered a similar crisis of serious consequences 28 years ago, we did go back to democracy, and we understand the importance of this, and we will always defend and promote human rights and promote dialogue and peaceful solution of conflict. For all these reasons, we support the efforts of those represented here to continue supporting our brother or sister Republic of Venezuela in confronting the crisis it is confronting, and we hope that this meeting of consultation will take a step in that direction. I thank you very much. Thank you, Madam Foreign Minister, and now I call upon the Foreign Minister of Colombia.
Mr. President, distinguished foreign ministers, distinguished Secretary General, we consider that convening this meeting was a very important decision, as it brings us together to consider the dire situation faced by our sister Republic of Venezuela and what may be the means forward for that country and its population. Colombia's single motivation with regard to Venezuela is the well-being of the Venezuelan people and its right to live under democracy writ large. That, as a neighboring country, as part of the Latin American reality in which Venezuela is enshrined, is our only motivation. Our peoples, our region, wish to respect the principles enshrined in our charter. In the past, we also talked about the problems that Colombia was undergoing. Now it is the turn of Venezuela and the very complex situation that country faces. Back when the countries of the continent, throughout the long years of the conflict that afflicted our country, spoke about Colombia, weighed the problems we were facing, spoke out, and reached out to help us move ahead through pacific means. And that is what we wish to do now. A very urgent task indeed. A national consensus is essential, one that will work to build up the democracy that must be wrought by Venezuelans for Venezuelans. They alone can find the way forward. But a national agreement that will make it possible to set the basis on which peaceful coexistence and the freedom of different agencies under a rule of law, the respect for electoral alternates among parties, political stability that needs to bring economic stability is a possibility if macroeconomic principles can be respected, and in a situation in which the country can again tap its vast store of natural resources. Colombia wishes to contribute in a permanent way to helping Venezuela resolve its present governance crisis. We believe we must persevere in helping Venezuela to move away from the high degree of polarization and intolerance that now describes the country. The Venezuelan people are the first affected by the present situation. They have difficulty covering their very basic needs to a dignified life. That is why all of the parties in presence need to reach out and take the measures necessary to rebuild social cohesion and peaceful coexistence in respect for all of the forces of that democracy. We believe that the convening of the National Assembly in the present circumstances would be negative. The call to have a constitutional assembly meet as the Constitution itself calls out, spells it as it did in 1929, principles that will allow Venezuela to restore stability, tolerance, respect for the rule of law, the separation of powers, respect for democracy and its various agencies. This is what is necessary for democracy to flourish. We've heard from the Prosecutor General of Venezuela that the convening of this meeting is unacceptable and will add nothing to any solution. Obviously, each must see to responsibilities and how most quickly local and general elections can be called so that true separation of powers is restored. That is the essence of democracy. We call out on the Venezuelan state to refrain from opposing the civil society that is marching in the streets. We call out such that political prisoners may be released so that we stop seeing the arming of a population which will only lead to further tragedy. The Venezuelans simply don't deserve it. In terms of medicine, pharmaceuticals, Colombia stands ready to assist any way possible. We know how tough the situation is for that country, and Colombia wishes in every possible way to assist. We wish to be pro-positive. We wish to assist in Venezuela's reaching basic agreements that will restore democracy. And in that regard, we feel that a group of friends of Venezuela that would be trusted by all parties would be a good step forward, possibly, therefore, establishing challenges of communication, channels of communication that are essential. The Holy See would be one such party, a party of complete trust. The United Nations with a representative of the Secretary General who would be used to resolving crises and searching for long-term solutions. That is what is needed. We also call to the members of the opposition to set aside political considerations and be generous in their search for a national consensus that will lead to long-term peaceful coexistence. Dozens of Venezuelans have died. Untold thousands live without the most basic needs, and many more hundreds of thousands stand to be victimized if this is not resolved. A better attitude toward solutions, an openness to another way forward is what is needed to bring conflict to an end in that country. Thank you.
Thank you, Madam Foreign Minister. I would just like to give you a couple of announcements. The problem is when I give you the floor, you don't have to push your button. It will be automatic. That's why some countries have disappeared from my list. And when you finish, the sound engineers will turn your mics off. After Colombia, there was Guatemala. So Guatemala has the floor. Thank you very much. Guatemala believes in the efficacy of multilateralism, and that's why we underscore the importance of this forum, which is the most important political dialogue of the hemisphere, to collectively look at the situation in Venezuela, complying with the provisions of the OAS Charter. Guatemala reaffirms its commitment to work for the strengthening of peace, respect, the rule of law, human rights, governance, and security, to consolidate public institutions and democracy. The purpose of government is protect human life, and that is why we are so concerned. A country cannot be silent in the face of violations of human rights. Our posture with respect to the problems in Venezuela is of solidarity toward our sister republic, and that's why we are so anxious for this situation to be resolved to benefit all Venezuelans. My country respects the principle of non-intervention, and we do not want to be a judge or an arbiter of what is happening in any other country. At the same time, Guatemala firmly believes that dialogue and negotiation are the right way to resolve conflicts, even very serious ones. These means must not be exhausted. We have had decades of conflict, which required huge efforts over a long period. And dialogue was the only tool that worked to achieve peace. The respect for life, we learned, is the most important thing. And in our case, there is a lot to do, but we believe that dialogue is the only way of living in peace. Guatemala, in this serious crisis it had in 2015, showed that the conduct could be exemplary. The people were exemplary. The military forces respected the life of the Guatemalans, and there was no wounded person, there was no death, there was nothing. So we feel that we must exhort the government and people of Venezuela to go back to the bargaining table, as the Pope said, to refrain from violence. We reiterate the need to preserve the rule of law following the constitutional norms, the separation of powers, the freedom of speech, and unrestricted respect for human rights in order to consolidate democracy. We are certain that it is possible to prevent conflict and preserve peace in accordance with dignity and participation. We urge the General Secretariat to concentrate on building trust, on dialogue. This will bring us closer to the solution of conflict and strengthening the relations among member states. The meetings that have been held over these months respond to the concern of the hemisphere on what is happening in Venezuela and the conviction that it is only the Venezuelans that need to find a solution to their present situation. But this forum can provide inputs to help with the political solution. It's important for the parties to come together in a constructive spirit, and that is why we would beg that dialogue not be abandoned. For that reason, Guatemala has participated in the group of countries which has taken initiatives to contribute to dialogue and to find solutions via peaceful and democratic solutions. I would repeat our commitment to the OAS as the space for multilateral dialogue in the hemisphere, and I am sure that it is here in this organization where we can cooperate to bring peace in Venezuela. Guatemala will definitely hold its hand out to the homeland of Bolivar. Thank you. I forgot to tell you something. Many countries have asked for the floor, and we only have this group of countries that are visible, but you come underneath. I will give you the floor one by one. Canada has the floor.
Thank you very much, and good afternoon. It is a great pleasure to be with you at such an important meeting as this, to reiterate yet again the willingness of Canada to continue cooperating with the people and the government of Venezuela in every way possible that might lead to a solution to the considerable political, economic, and social challenges that the country faces.
Solidarity with our Spanish language colleagues. Monsieur le Secrétaire Général, chef
Distinguished Secretary General of this Organization of American States, I thank you for this opportunity to take a few minutes to consider the situation in Venezuela. As we are all well aware, tensions are rising. There are great demonstrations everywhere. The population continues to suffer, and the time has come to step up to protect liberty, to protect the rule of law, democracy, and the rules for people.
Democratic standards are the hallmarks of our hemisphere. I think the experience of all of us in the Americas has proven that democratic progress is possible and that democracy is essential for the prosperity of all people. Like all of you, like everyone who has spoken, Canada is extremely concerned about the deteriorating humanitarian conditions in Venezuela, about the food shortages, about the lack of medicine, about people in state hospitals who are dying of preventable diseases. And like everyone here, Canada feels an acute legal, political, and indeed moral obligation to stand up for the people of Venezuela. Their voices must not be silenced through repression. Let me join the colleagues who have already spoken and referred to the collective commitment to democracy that was made by all of us when the Inter-American Democratic Charter was adopted in Lima. Oh, where's our Peruvian colleague? Almost 16 years ago. After, let me remind you, as a proud Canadian, the concept was first launched at the Quebec City Summit of the Americas. As we seek resolutions to the Venezuelan crisis, let's remember that the Charter has helped to find solutions in the past. In Honduras, and even previously in Venezuela, the Charter has been a valuable tool for addressing democratic difficulties. When Haiti proactively sought the engagement of its neighbors to help it find a way forward on its presidential elections, the OAS delegation played an important role in brokering a dialogue that achieved positive results. We also here today need to acknowledge that the crisis in Venezuela, in addition to touching us all morally, can't be contained. It affects us all. Already, desperate people, refugees and asylum seekers are fleeing Venezuela. The dramatic rise in criminality and the risk that weapons will fall out of control should be a grave concern for all of us, and especially to my colleagues here who have borders with Venezuela. But meaningful progress is impossible without a credible process of mediation. It's impossible when key political leaders are imprisoned and barred from running for office. The Government of Canada and really the people of Canada are proud to raise our voice in support of democracy and human rights in Venezuela. On April the 3rd, Canada was very pleased to co-sponsor the OAS resolution reiterating the call on Venezuela to restore constitutional order and respect for democratic rights. Not long after, I personally expressed Canada's regret about President Maduro's stated intention to withdraw from the OAS. On May 4th, when President Maduro announced that he would establish a constituent assembly to change the Constitution, Canada was gravely concerned, and we spoke out as we do today. We call urgently for the setting of an electoral calendar, for the restoration of constitutional order, and for the release of political prisoners. As members of the OAS, all of us are duty-bound to promote and defend democracy, because democracy benefits us all in our own countries, and we all prosper in a democratic neighborhood. Canada strongly hopes that the Venezuelan authorities will choose to remain with us inside our community of democracies represented here around the table. In every important way, historically, politically, economically, and of course geographically, Venezuelans deserve to remain at the heart of our hemisphere. All of us are going to meet again 3 weeks from now in Cancun. Let's work together in the time between now and then to turn the tide and to set a more hopeful direction for Venezuela and for our hemisphere. Muchas gracias. Merci.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Canada. The Foreign Minister of Paraguay has the floor.
Sonido para Paraguay, por favor.
A microphone for Paraguay, please.
Bueno, permítanme explicarles cómo vamos a continuar.
We're going to continue. The Assistant Secretary General says that the original equipment is already in Mexico for the assembly. And many of the technical problems are because the real equipment isn't here. We will not have the screen, but we will have sound. I did note down the countries on the list of speakers. I thought to do that. These are the speakers: Paraguay, Chile, Brazil, Dominican Republic, U.S., El Salvador, Uruguay, Jamaica, Peru, and Costa Rica. If necessary, please lift your nameplate and we will add your name. We don't think that the screen will be fixed, so please let us know if you wish to speak in addition to the countries I just read out. So we will now give the floor to Paraguay.
Thank you very much. Mr. President, distinguished ministers, foreign affairs of the hemisphere, distinguished Secretary General, ladies and gentlemen, it's exactly a year, 1st of June of 2016, that we met in this very place. We, that is our representatives within the Permanent Council, who spoke to the question of the situation in Venezuela. It is a year, day for day, that we offered our best efforts to generate an open and inclusive dialogue amongst the governments and the various social and political entities of that nation for the preservation of peace and security in Venezuela. All of the initiatives for dialogue were approved. One, I must admit, was not supported, but all of those that were supported very much emphasized the participation of the Venezuelan people with the help of the international community. Yet here we are a year later with much, much starker backdrops, more than 70 dead, dozens of injured, many dozens, political prisoners, a displacement without precedent, an uncommon and appalling repression of the Venezuelan citizens who are calling out for respect and for an appliance of their constitution. All of this, I regret to say, confirms the great skepticism that my delegation felt and expressed a year ago. And yet, against this appalling backdrop, we have no other possible way forward but to try again and to make our best efforts to try to mitigate the situation even as it worsens day by day. The international community, indeed our own hemisphere, was not indifferent to this grave social, economic, and political crisis that one of our member countries is living through. It wasn't indifferent. It is not indifferent today. What I wish to express here is that we cannot speak of interventionism or interference when what we are doing is upholding universal principles. That's what we're upholding, because these are commitments that in all good faith we have all undertaken. And this harks back to the very groundwork of our democratic principles enshrined in our basic and foundational documents, and did so with full sovereignty and in full knowledge of what we were doing. The principles of our charter were accepted by all. Its precepts are binding on us all. Venezuela is no exception to that rule. The grave break in democratic order in that country runs against the basic precepts of representative democracy, of respect for human rights and fundamental freedoms, access to power, and its exercise under the rule of law. The holding of free, just, and universal suffrage and secret elections as a basic expression of the sovereignty of the people. The plural representation of parties and the indispensable separation of powers with the necessary independence accorded thereto. We have seen that each one of these basic nuggets of democracy have been eroded over the time that I have referred to. The only alternative, it would appear, for the Venezuelan government, it feels, is to withdraw. We hope it reconsiders, because surely by sitting together and putting our heads together, we might yet find solutions within our reach. We call for an immediate ceasing and desisting of oppression and violence, an upholding of enshrined principles, an end to arbitrary arrest, the disproportionate use of violence, the use of military tribunals to which civilians are quite improperly subject, among many others. We call on the Venezuelan authorities to stop holding prisoners of conscience and respect their own constitutional principles, and to set out a credible calendar for the holding of elections which will garner, we insist, the international community to observe. We call on a process of dialogue and negotiation amongst the Venezuelans to lead to a broad-based understanding that will lead to concrete guarantees that will be implemented in hopes that the democratic order may be regained as soon as possible for the welfare and well-being of all. We hope that a year from now we will not come back and see the situation has worsened, but that to the contrary, that good solutions have been found to these dire challenges that the sister republic of Venezuela is facing. It can be our only hope. Thank you. Thank you, Minister. I give the floor to the Vice Minister of Chile.
Mr. President, in this meeting of foreign ministers of the OAS, I would like to state that for the Chilean government, the promotion and protection of human rights of all persons, as well as unlimited respect for the rule of law, due process, democracy, are a permanent goal of our foreign policy. The concern for these fundamental values is not opposed to the principle of non-intervention in internal affairs of other countries. Our government has followed the situation in Venezuela with concern, and we have made efforts to support peaceful dialogue there many times, including a number of joint communiques and declarations with other countries of the region. We are sorry that the efforts of the ex-presidents and the Vatican have not flourished, and there has not been a political will to comply with the commitments assumed. So many deaths, so many detained, so many injured in the last few days. It's the Venezuelans themselves who must determine their own future, and that is what we promote as a sister country. But Venezuelans must be able to do so in peace, without violence, without pressure or repression, by the free exercise of popular will expressed at the ballot box. That is why we reiterate the need to set a schedule for elections. Elections have been postponed many times in accordance with the mandates of the Constitution itself. Governors and other authorities have not been elected. The powers and prerogatives in the National Assembly established by the Constitution for an autonomous body, independent body, have not been respected. We make an appeal that political prisoners be released and that the political rights of citizens be reinstated. We are very concerned by the new announcement of a state of exception, as well as the holding of a constituent assembly. Chile agrees with the expressions of concern of the Pope. He said that, and I quote, "Everything that can be done for Venezuela has to be done, but with the necessary guarantees," end of quote. We would wish to support the Venezuelan people so that they can move forward and get out of the political and economic and humanitarian situation they are in. We sincerely believe that the dialogue among the parties will help to have peace and stability return to Venezuela. The regional community, the international community, must be ready to support this re-encounter. I thank you very much.